Good evening. You're listening to the Xtreme Movie Show. I'm your host, Rob. Tonight's episode, Xtreme TV Season 2, Episode 22 of Twin Peaks, the season and series finale of one of the best TV shows ever made. I'm, of course, joined by the millennial man himself, Professor Pixel, the early 20-something, watching this as a first watch all the way through. And I have to say, Pixel, for my initial thoughts about this, because I think we have to tie in Season 1 and Season 2, is one of the big themes we've talked about is how when Who Killed Laura Palmer was introduced because ABC forced their hand, that's when Season 2 fell into the toilet. We all know this. We know it sucked. There's a lot of absurd plot lines, some interesting stuff, but ultimately we were adrift without any semblance of story until the past episode or two, and thankfully David Lynch himself came back, directed this episode, and it feels to me like Season 1, and I think overall it's a great episode, and I think smartly Lynch made sure that the majority of all the characters, no matter how little their plot lines were shown, and also leaves us a potential way to potentially have a Season 3, believe it or not, despite the way this ends. And yes, we do have a Season 3 on Showtime that would come some 20 plus years later. However, we'll be reviewing that within a few weeks after we do Fire Walk With Me. But overall, I really like this episode, and I thought he made chicken salad from chicken shit, if we want to use that old school expression. What say you for your initial take on this episode, the season finale?
What the hell?
You've never seen it, so all I've got to say is this whole thing, and it's fantastic. I mean, what the hell? Exactly. I'm glad you made it to this point. I didn't know if you would.
Yeah, it's definitely something unique.
And you did not know what was going to happen, did you?
No, I didn't know
awesome.
what was going to happen.
That's made the past 7 months worth it.
I don't want to go into too much detail before we get into the actual meat of what happened. So I think we're better off just going right ahead. So Beyond Life and Death, the final episode of Season 2 and the final episode for 20-something years, starts at the sheriff's station with Andy and Lucy. Lucy's being ridiculous, but Andy quickly gets a kiss. But we go quickly to something that matters, and that's Dale.
Something that matters. True. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
He's looking pretty disheveled because, well, his girlfriend of a few weeks has been taken. And clearly he's worried. He and Hawk are just staring at the blackboard. They know it's a map. And Andy in the last episode says he knows where they have to go, but they just went back to the sheriff's station to look at the map. So I guess Andy didn't know anything. Dale quickly says, I'm trying to remember the context of why he brings up Fire Walk With Me, but those words
we don't know. Again. We don't know.
No. And that's when Pete enters, and Pete's acting a little off this episode, and he's saying how
he's pissed.
The log lady stole my truck, and Dale is pretty sure that no, that's not the log lady, and says the log lady will be there in a minute. And sure enough, in that moment, he figures out that they need to go to the Ghostwood forest. It's all coming together. And I'm trying to remember the Glastonbury Grove. That's the specific place they list. And that's when Pete says, like King Arthur? But King Arthur's buried in England. I don't see what this has to do with anything. But then in comes the log lady, finally. And Pete asks for his truck, and that's when Dale tells him, no, she doesn't have your truck. And he gets an oil from the log lady. And she explains how her husband says that this oil is an opening to a gateway. And finally, the final part of this scene is Ronette. We haven't seen her in so long. But she comes in, and Dale opens the jar of oil and has her smell it. And she starts kind of freaking out. Just she backs away and holds tight onto I'm trying to remember if it was one of the deputies, but
It was Hawk.
yeah, it's
Hawk's, holding her, steady, so she doesn't like faint or pass out. She's really creeped out.
yeah, and the oil she smelled. She did smell it before the night Laura Palmer was killed. And that's pretty much the end of this first scene. I know there's a lot to it, but that's
Well,
oh,
all I gotta say is you're right. We go from something that matters. You see Lucy and dipshit Deputy Andy together, and that's what they're supposed to be, and we're supposed to like it, even though we don't. That is the thing. So without Tremaine around and all the stupid side stuff that they've gone through, it seems like it fits. And we don't know how much we're going to see of Andy in this episode or even Lucy, but we know, okay, that they're where they need to be. And then, it was obviously a quick scene. And then the scene we're discussing right now, again, I've said any single time we've got like Cooper and Truman together and even Hawk, and they're in that room, it just feels like Twin Peaks. They're investigating something, they're doing something. It's good stuff. I think the music was really good in this episode too, staying for the most part pretty tense, at least with the main plot lines and main characters. That's a good thing. There's a few episodes where that didn't work. So I'm feeling really drawn into this because, again, when I saw Ronette, I was like, wow, I don't think we're going to see her ever again. Who knows? But she's alive. It reminds us of, what happened with Laura, even though they haven't really mentioned Laura to this point. It's a sense of urgency. And we know this is the last episode. So at the time when this aired back, I think it was like late spring of 91, maybe early summer, that even though a lot of people turned their eyes away and the schedule had been juggled around, I think we had the Gulf War going on at the time too, people did tune in to say, okay, how did this wrap up? So it had some good viewership, and Lynch is involved. It automatically feels just better. But the whole thing about introducing King Arthur, I think, is kind of interesting. You can talk about the Lady in the Lake, the Sword in the Stone, all these types of tales and what they mean. And if we don't know what they mean, which is the angle we're going to go with, that's okay. I don't know what significance that may or may not have. And that's where it's interesting because Lynch will put things in like that, either as a red herring, just a false flag, if you will, just something to make you go, oh, wow, that's deep. Let me find ways that fits something else, just to kind of screw with you. Or sometimes he does it just because he heard something or likes something or whatever. I mean, after all, that's how we got Bob. He was just a stagehand that said, I kind of like what this looks like. Let me just film it. And he became Bob. But we'll talk about that shortly, because you're right. The scene ends, but that plot line kind of continues in a sense, because you see Wyndham Earl taking Anne out, and he's not looking very intimidating here, putting the flashlight in your face. It's dark at night. He's taken her out to the grove, and he goes to the spot where you see like this little ring on the ground. It looks like snow or salt or something, like there's a white ring around. You can't see it. It's super dark out. You can barely see some trees in the background. And it takes her out there, and she kind of looks like she starts getting entranced a little bit because she's freaking out. And she's spouting something from the Bible, some Psalms verse or whatever. And it gets next to this little hole in the ground. And as bad as Wyndham Earl comes across to me, not intimidating at all or scary, except for maybe one or two scenes, in here he's still not. But the background, I think, elevates the scene because he stands by the hole next to her, and he kind of doesn't really know what to do or what's going to happen. He just knows this is where I need to be for whatever it is he's trying to do, which obviously in abducting her is trying to get his vengeance on Cooper for Cooper sleeping with his wife, which we get. And in the background, the trees seem to kind of converge to these red drapes that we've seen before. And it's a really slow transition, and it looks like they kind of walk behind them, and then the scene ends. And like, oh, now we're back to it. This is the good stuff, because that's when season one got really trippy, is when we started talking about the place with the vertically challenged individual and the giant and dreams and speaking in tongues and all sorts of stuff. I'm like, okay, I think we're going to get some. And then it transitions to another scene.
Yes. And this is a series of unfortunate events coming up, because it starts out with Ed snapping in a room. He's feeling good. He's with Norma, while Mike and Nadine are seated on another couch. And Dr. Jacoby is there to help her. And after her head is wrapped, Mike goes on to say, well, I really love you. And he goes in for a kiss, but she doesn't let him. She pushes him away, saying that she doesn't know him. What the hell is he doing? And asks Ed to make him go away. And Ed goes over to Nadine and says, "How old are you? How old are you?" And she doesn't want to answer because it's a stupid question. But finally, she answers. She's woken up, and nobody's going to be happy this night. Quickly from there, with a tree transition, we go to Donna's house. Ben's there, and Donna goes down with her suitcase and wants to be left alone. She's acting really kind of bratty. And that's when her well, I guess stepfather in a way, comes in and asks Ben to leave. And from behind him, a woman, Sylvia. Is it Ben's wife? I can't remember.
Yes.
But William eventually gets pissed off and just goes to Ben and knocks him down. And he hits the fireplace. He's bleeding from his head, so it's a little worrisome. And finally, before I go ahead and pass it to you, we see Andrew. It's the middle of the night, and he takes the key. He recognizes that it's for a safety deposit box, so he replaces it with another key for a safety deposit box. And Pete sees, and he's like, "Oh, Andrew." He's disappointed.
Yeah, things are happening. This backing up here to the scene with Big Ed, Nadine, and Mike, and all that. This is absurd to me because when they're sitting on the couch, Mike, he's got, and the visual of it's incredible to me. Nadine and Mike have these matching, the old like cartoonish things, like when you would have a tooth pulled. They have these bandages with blood on the top of their head, one going around their forehead. It's because of what happened, obviously earlier in the evening there with the Twin Peaks, Miss Twin Peaks contest too, with the lights went out when Wyndham Earl abducted Anne. But it makes sense in that Nadine got hurt in there. She got another concussion, which is what caused it in the first place, I believe. Therefore, it's a trigger for her getting her memory back. And I'm like, I don't have a problem with this at all. And what do we really think of with her? We think of her, that screeching woman we first met, talking about drape runners and being kind of whacked out of her mind, and we don't know why. And then when she get really pissed, she'd get that superwoman strength, which really kind of never went anywhere except for one or two scenes of comic relief. I don't have a problem with this scene at all because, again, I'm thinking, this is the light stuff before they go into the dark, and they're at least giving some semblance of an ending to it, with also, I think, introducing a pivot point should in the future this would have ever gotten renewed. Typically back then in the late 80s, early 90s, that didn't happen, despite letter writing campaigns and all sorts of things that super fans would do. Because again, we're talking 80s to 90s here. We didn't really have the internet like we do today. It was much different as far as to try to appeal to a major network to get this to go. But I want to say this is the exact same thing with the quick scene right after that too at Donna Hayward's house, because she looks like she's taken off. They do not explicitly say that Ben is her father. He says, "Hey, I wanted to do right. Can you forgive me for trying to say the right thing?" But they've never said, "Yes, I am your father." They don't do it. The mom's sitting there. She's in her wheelchair. They're all upset, but it's not specifically there. So it leads me to believe that's a nice, convenient way of alluding to it, of course, and not being committal to leave it open should something in the future happen. I think Lynch was pretty smart in doing that with some of these plot lines, just because this was his baby and he feels like he got screwed over because he despises season 2. When he came in for this last episode, he said, "No, well, I'm going to end it like this." So I don't really have a problem with it because, again, they're all minor characters. And I think by early in this episode, giving us what seems to be the basic ending for a lot of these characters. We get into the meat and potatoes of the friggin' episode, which is Cooper and what the hell's happening to him. Because you're right, even the quick scene there with Andrew Packard getting the safe deposit key, and Pete finds him, and Pete's kind of pissy this episode, wants in on it. We know that that's probably not going to be anything big. We don't know if it's going to be all connected to stuff, but it doesn't seem like it's going to be, because the next scene is the good stuff. It's Cooper, it's Harry. They find Pete's, he's got this old pickup truck, and then they kind of walk where the path leads them, and it's late at night and stuff. Cooper, there's a neat little spot in here with Cooper because it's really late at night, it's filmed outside, there's not a lot of extra lights or something. It's not filmed the way like a lot of TV shows do now with a lot of the blue light, and there's light everywhere, but it looks dark. This just looks like natural dark. Cooper gets this weird kind of look on his face, wherever, and he's like, Harry, I have to go in alone from here. And Harry's like, why? And Cooper doesn't really say anything, and he just kind of walks off. And it's neat because there's a scene where from like right to left, he's panning the flashlight, and you see on the pine trees. It just gives you a moment to draw into the nature part to it. He comes up to the hole that we talked about that looks like it has a black liquid on the top. And he shines the flashlight on it, which to me looks like, the Eye of Sauron, or the all-seeing eye if you're into the Illuminati or whatever, kind of. It just made me go, there's a lot of little symbolism you could put on here too. But he walks around it, and he's looking around and stuff, and he's not sure where to go. And just like Wyndham Earle, we see the red drapes, and he too seems to disappear behind them. It's pretty cool. But the scene continues, and for the rest of this episode, the majority of it is actually going to take place in what appears to be, I'm going to assume, is the Black Lodge. I'll do a little bit of it, then hand it off to you. Cooper walks in. We get this like jazzy song going on about sycamore trees. Cooper walks in this really retro looking kind of small hallway with what appears to be a Venus de Milo type statue at the end with nothing but red drapes around. And so, he hears the singing, he walks through, and then we see the vertically challenged individual doing this little dance. It's an extended dance. He goes to sit down. We see some African-American jazz singer who's got a great voice, actually, and I don't know what the song is, but it's not the jazz stuff that we heard with Bobby from season 1 or season 2 that we said that was the jazzy music, but he finishes his quick little song about the sycamore trees, because that's what Cooper noticed in the woods. Sycamore trees, or that's what he does notice. And we get some of the flashing strobe light effects and all that too. And there you see Cooper coming in and sitting down, and he's got this weird look on his face. Before they get any more detailed into what's going on here, you get a quick little cut scene of, Deputy Dipshit, asking for Cooper, and Truman's there. He's like, hey, come on over here. And they just meet or whatever. And then you get a quick, beautiful shot of the old railroad tracks that Renette Pulaski we saw walking across there of Twin Peaks, basically suggesting that time is passing until the morning. So let me hand that off over to you here before we continue.
Yep, it's the day. Harry and Andy apparently waiting 10 hours since Dale had entered the Red Room, as I'm calling it. And Andy says, you want me to get coffee? Yep. You want me to get food? Yep. And it's a list until finally we move on to a new place. We've never seen this place before. There's a lady sleeping at her desk, and an older gentleman named Mr. Miller. And we see Audrey come in, and she takes out some chains, and she chains herself to the vault door. And she explains how until Twin Peaks finally has a conversation about saving our environment, I will not leave this place. But can you give me some water? And after 10 minutes of this man getting her water, we see who else come in but Andrew. Andrew and Pete, they come in, and Audrey's like, oh yeah, I can let you in. She opens the door behind her. I guess it wasn't locked or anything, but quickly they come in, and they're saying how this is what it's all led to. It's all leading to this. And finally, Andrew opens the box to find a bomb with a note saying "got you," and then it blows up. We see money and a pair of glasses fly, and it would seem that everybody there died. I don't know why you're laughing. Audrey dying because she was doing this stunt for her father pisses me off, but
Well, let me just say that this scene annoyed me, and I think it's fantastic all at the same time. It annoyed me because I intellectualize it as, okay, this is David Lynch making fun of bank people being so precise and slow and customer service. Because right, Audrey just walks in, does her thing, and he still gets her water. And yes, he does take several moments to get it. And this dude is like 70, 80 years old. He's almost as bad as the server that was getting milk for Cooper, some episodes that we've seen once or twice. And the dude's rocking these huge, gigantic black wire-framed glasses, Coke bottle lenses, as we used to call them back in the day, when they were super thick, for somebody that had really bad eyesight. Harry Carey style for you Midwest Chicago fans. And I'm like, I like the idea that this whole stupid angle we cared nothing about, it was basically him getting them from their greed. I appreciate that with the bomb, because it's right there. And as soon as they open it, boom, there's nothing with it. I was like, okay, that's cool. I like it. But what popped me was the glasses flying in slow motion, and you just see them landing in pine trees with dollar bills falling on them. It's a fantastic, funny scene. And yeah, part of me was like, oh shit, is Audrey dead? And she probably is.
Audrey
until we get bodies. Well, you know what? Until we get bodies, I'll just say, it's that whole TV thing. Never say never, right? Ne dis jamais jamais, as the French would say. It felt a little out of place because of how dark the previous scene was, but it also works that way too. So, but if it does end them all, it's fitting, because her storyline to me was not good at all after Cooper. And part of the whole reason I think with that too is because Laura Flynn Boyle, the actress who played was it Audrey, I guess. She's the one that was, I think at the time, was dating Kyle and was basically like, I don't want you to have this type of relationship with her or whatever, and even though they introduced Annie in here too, so I'm like, yeah, whatever. It'd have been much more interesting if Cooper did go for the young stuff, legal stuff, by the way, those listening. But we do get a quick shot too after the wonderful explosion, because right now I'm going Lynch meets business in this episode. We get a nice little shot of the cafe, an outside shot, people coming in there, and you see Major Garland Briggs sitting down with his wife. And it's like they're on one of their dates, and they're doing some really, really light, lovey-dovey, old person kissy poo while sharing a cup of coffee. I mean, it's actually kind of sweet and cute. And then you've got Bobby and Shelley all excited and acting like young people in love. And he's like, oh, Shelley, I think we should get married. She's like, but I'm still wearing Leo's ring. And, they seem like they're back together, which, again, if they do nothing more in this episode, and this is the last we see of these characters, I'm okay with that. I like the sense of finality. This is where they belong, for better or for worse. But what's interesting to me that stuck out in this scene, and I'll hand it to you after I describe it, is while all this is going on, actually two things happen. One's ludicrous and one is interesting. The ludicrous thing is what happens next, and that's Dr. Jacoby comes in. And he is rocking some Bela Lugosi velvet tight cape with a felt hat, and it's got red trim on it, and he has the glasses with the one's got the blue lens and the other one has the red, which is the opposite sides of the light spectrum, if anybody gives a rat's ass. But he's got Laura Palmer's wife in there, which we mentioned previously, that she was one of the few people that actually had the ability to see supernatural stuff, like Bob or Mike, visions of it. And when they go to sit down to Agent Briggs, she basically is going to say something, and it's in this weird speaking voice saying, I'm in the Black Lodge with Dale Cooper. So we don't know who that is. Maybe she's just an earthly vessel and it's the spirit of Laura. I don't know. But then you see this look that Garland Briggs gets on his face, and Yeah, it's pretty good too. I might be jumping ahead, but what I'm gonna throw in here real quick too is that I wrote down here that oh, it's the same scene. I'm going through the episode right now. You get apparently this other waitress we've never seen before named Heidi, who's this pleasantly voluptuous, plump German young woman who comes in with braces, Heidi, and they act like they've known her or whatever. And like, hey, you're late. And she's like, yeah, I had car problems. And she's like, yeah, you must be riding the old man again. Ha, 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 there. And we got a quick shot of like Leo still holding the spiders over his head. I mean, it's like, okay, let's just shove as much as we can in a quick scene to get to the good stuff. That's how I feel, but it works.
Yeah. But in that voice, I believe she says, "I am Wyndham Earl," or it could have just been the caption saying Wyndham Earl speaking. I'm not sure. I can't remember.
Did you have the? I have the DVD version. I'm looking at the subtitles and I'm going through right now, and it just says that Sarah here has a message for you that's really important. You know, Wyndham Earl, Briggs is holding hands with her, and she does great at this. This is what she does well, but she's getting ready to speak. She's got this great look on her face, and it's that weird deep voice. And it doesn't say Wyndham Earl, it just says in distorted voice, I'm in the Black Lodge with Dale Cooper. So Briggs has this look of consternation on his face that like, oh, I got to do something. And, I always love Major Briggs as a character. I think he's great. And it's nice that him and his son Bobby, even though they were a little bit estranged, he's having a good time with his wife before this serious moment, and Bobby's having a good time with Shelley. So it works for me.
I mean, yeah. I guess Netflix spoiled that little tidbit for me, but that's fine. That's fine.
Well, you bring up an interesting point, because I think if you have there's a DVD version out there, I don't know if it's like the Blu-ray or remastered, that actually would have the long lady giving like a little 20-second speech in front with some words and notes. That never played on the televised product. So it was basically like her saying one or two little mysterious things about Twin Peaks or some sort of philosophical saying, which of course had some merit for whatever the upcoming episode would be. So it's just depending on how you see it. These things get cut different ways. There might be an episode or two where a little bit's cut because of commercials. So for me, I don't know who it is, but it does sound like a devilish voice, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does.
Now, since this is your first watch, and pretty much the rest of the episode is the heavy duty stuff, we've raced through all the crap. I want to hand it off to you, and then you tell me when to come in, because I just think the rest of this episode is fantastic.
All right. I've been taking notes since the very beginning, and this is the largest block that I have. There's no pauses, because every scene has a transition. And okay, we get a break here, we get a break there. There's no break. This is just a long single scene.
Draws you in.
Yeah. We see the dwarf, and he says to Dale, he's waiting for you. And I didn't know exactly what he meant when he said that. Looking back now, I do. But after that, quickly the dwarf and Dale have a stare down. And finally, the little man speaks again. When you see me again, it won't be me. And he goes on to explain how this place is a waiting room. So the dwarf offers him coffee and announces some of Dale's friends are there.
All right, let's pause for a second. Did you notice in the scene, because I took some notes too, and I'm going through it again, when we saw the hallway, the Venus de Milo wasn't in there. The Venus de Milo is now in this room. And I'm saying all this stuff because I don't know if it matters or not. But did you notice what happened with the cup of coffee?
Yes, because
okay.
The coffee was about to be served, because we see Laura Palmer sitting there saying that she'll see him again in 25 years, then disappears, and finally the old man comes back from the very first episode of this season, and he serves him coffee. And we get to see one more person, the giant, and he says one and the same. And I guess he's saying that all these people are somehow one and the same. And finally, that's when Dale looks at the coffee. And he goes to take a sip, and it's solid. He pulls it away, and after a moment, he shakes it, and it's suddenly liquid. I'm not sure what that means, but
all right. So let's pause for a moment. Okay. So Laura shows up, and she's not speaking backwards. It's just that stilted kind of whatever voice effect that they put on her, so you can still understand it like in English. It wasn't like a dark devilish voice that we heard, the Agent Coopers in the Black Lodge that we just heard Major Briggs be the recipient of through the human vessel Sarah. What I thought was interesting about here, because this is where I'm assuming it's the Black Lodge, because that's, the whole idea of evil, and Wyndham Earle's trying to, I guess for lack of a better word, weaponize it. So that's why and that's why he kidnapped Andy for Andy's fear, so so that would allow him entrance, I suppose, or whatever. And there was something about the oil that the log lady's husband knew about. I don't know if that's because they smelled that smell before, and so that might have been a convenient, like, little plot thing. But I was trying to focus on, like, oh my gosh, what is really, really important in here? And the thing with Laura is that I just wanted to pause on, because it's going to get even crazier here in a minute. When she says, "I'll see you in 25 years," she winks her left eye, and then she does this little hand gesture, which, depending on how much you want to read into, you go, well, what's the significance of it? Is a letter? Is it a thing that had happened before that's between them, or whatever? It's hard to say. Some would suggest that it has something to do with the fact that he's got some sort of spirituality to him, and that's what many back in the day used to say, oh no, that's some mystical Buddha type thing, what she's doing with her hands, because it's not like she's waving by. It's just has her hands a certain way, and like, to your point, when it cuts to Dale, and then it cuts back to her, gone. So it's like, So I don't know what, or if anything, that may have. And obviously with this episode ending, it may mean nothing. I'm just putting it there because it's very particular and very deliberate. And that's why I said the same thing about the Venus de Milo, because I'm trying to go, well, is there more than one room? Is there not, or what? But yeah, I wanted to ask you, did you think what was going on in this room, that the giant, the really old guy waiter, the milk waiter, I like to call him, and vertically challenged individual, all the same people?
I'm not sure. I think that's what they're trying to imply. So maybe this little man's just trying to help out Agent Cooper. But I feel quickly, because the scene takes a different turn in just a moment, we should continue. After the coffee debacle, the little man says, "Wow, Bob, wow." Finally, he also says, "Fire, walk with me." And there's flames and a flash, and we hear a scream. That's when Dale walks out into another hallway. And so after another turn, and I'm pretty sure the statue is there as well.
In the hallway, yep.
He steps into another waiting room. Nobody's there. So he turns around, goes back, and there's the dwarf. He says, "This is the wrong way." So Dale goes again, and whenever he enters the other room, the dwarf's laughing and announces another friend. And we see, for the first time in a long time, Maddie.
Yeah.
Who says to watch out for her cousin before fading away.
She's saying in that it's the same voice too every time we hear them. Yeah.
And then the dwarf, as he goes back to find an unfurnished waiting room, the dwarf says, "Doppelganger." Finally, we see Laura again, and she's making the same hand gesture. But then she says, "Meanwhile," before she screams, and she just screams bloody murder as Dale runs to the next room. Suddenly we see Dale must have gotten hit or something. He's bleeding from his gut, like when he was shot. And there's a trail of blood leading into the previous room. Dale says Carolyn's name, but he sees Annie. And he calls for her as he sees Annie and him on the ground. Finally.
Yeah. So let's pause right here. Yeah, just because visually, because there's not a lot of dialogue going on here, I'm focusing on the auditory stuff with the voices and what I see. And, he's going back and forth to these two rooms. And when he goes back to this room, Laura and the vertically challenged individual, they have, that cloudy contact lens eye effect thing going on too with doppelganger. So I'm going, okay, when they have that doppelganger. But yes, Cooper sees Annie in this room. We get some strobe effects, but he also sees himself laying on the ground next to her while Annie looks like she's getting up. And I don't know, Annie looks like she's can kind of hear something or is blind or she's something or whatever, maybe not recognizing it. But it gets really, really trippy at this point because the Cooper standing up is the one that we're following. He's the one that's got the looks like a stab wound in the gut, but also the Cooper we're seeing on the ground also has the exact same stab wound in the gut. So there's definitely two Coopers right now.
Yeah. Yep. And we quickly go from there to see Annie, truly Annie, in her black dress, and she says that she saw the face of the man who killed her. It was her husband. And after a moment, she's not Annie. The confusion ends because it's actually Carolyn. She says she's alive and quickly becomes Laura again and starts screaming. And this is all leading until we finally see Wyndham Earl. And Annie appears on the side and then disappears. And Wyndham Earl laughs as he says, in that same voice that's affected by this red room, he says he will let Annie live for Dale's soul. And Cooper accepts. We then see Cooper stabbed. But then, suddenly, Bob appears, and he's stabbing Wyndham Earl. And he's telling him to be quiet before Bob looks at Dale and says to go, because Wyndham can't ask for Dale's soul, and Bob will take his. And that's when we see Wyndham Earl with a flaming head before he just kind of shuts down. And that's when Bob starts to laugh. And then we see Dale, after Dale had just left, enter with that same glazed over eye look. And he's laughing with Bob. Do you want me to pause and let you say anything, or should I finish this up?
You continue. Like I said, this is your first time. I'll hold back.
Yeah, well, it seems that there is indeed a second Cooper. Quickly, as the main Dale leaves, we see Leland again. It's been a while. It's quite sad when I think about it. But Leland says that he didn't kill anybody. And
cloudy-eyed, like the other Dale or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's when Double Cooper is laughing in the distance, following Dale as he's trying to leave. And one of my favorite things is as he's walking into the curtain after laughing with Leland for a second, he glances to the camera before he ends up chasing.
Oh, you noticed that?
Yeah. He ends up chasing with a laugh until finally they fade in the curtains. Finally, as Bob laughs into the camera, we finally cut to the forest where Dale and Annie are on the ground, passed out, and Harry quickly calls out Cooper's name and runs to them. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it looks like she's got a broken nose. They've managed to escape the Black Lodge, the Red Room, as you call it. So you've got Cooper and you got Andy, and we have the transition scene of the Twin Peaks Falls, and then you've got Cooper laying there in bed, and this is pretty much the end of the episode and series. So how about it?
Yeah. Cooper finally seems to wake up with the doc and Harry at his sides, and he asks,
Says he wasn't sleeping.
Yeah,
I like that line.
I wasn't sleeping. And he says, how's Annie? And they explain how Annie's going to be okay. Cooper gets up and says he needs to brush his teeth. And he's like, Harry's like, that's a good idea. Cooper then goes to the hall, turns around, says it again before he finally goes into the bathroom. He starts to squeeze out the toothpaste, and then he's just squeezing it all into the sink before he finally looks in the mirror and hits his head against it. And we see in the reflection Bob, as Cooper's asking, how's Andy? How's Annie? With a laugh. And that's the end.
I love it. Tremendous ending. This is how you tie things up. This is how you end it. It's cynical. It's bitter. It's philosophical. You have hope when things are slightly against you or really against you. Now we got the main guy we've rooted for the entire time being taken over. We don't know if the soul thing's there. We know there's doppelgangers. We don't know what the hell is going on. It's like, damn it, this is the type of way to end an episode that makes you want a season 3. And thankfully we'll get it some 20 plus years later, which we'll start talking about here in a week or so. But I got to tell you, I thought it was a fantastic way to wrap things up. To your point, the way you described it basically being, they got all the crap out of the way, and this is basically one really long scene. Fantastic way to do it. And to me, it leaves a lot. I'm not going to say, there may be some things we can quibble about if we ever wanted to review it and say, well, what about this or what about that if we go back and look at our notes. But like I say, I thought the genius of the episode was, okay, just give everybody their final whatever it is. Bomb at the bank doesn't mean everybody's going to die. No. Doesn't mean it probably should. Yeah. If we'd ever see a season 3, maybe we'll find out. At the time, of course, I'm saying it. We know there's a season 3. But here at the end, they put all the emphasis and attention on Laura Palmer and Dale Cooper, and that's what Twin Peaks is. You didn't see Truman too much. You hardly saw Annie, saw just enough of Hawk. It made you feel like you're in it. It really felt like a microcosm of everything that should be Twin Peaks, with some nature scenes and all that too. And one little minor thing too, now that we have Bob infecting Cooper on the outside, it makes us think, well, is that really what happened with Leland Palmer? Because Leland Palmer seemed to come to the realization that he was the one raping his daughter for a very long time and then finally murdering her. But then the way it seems, it's not really him. It's the fact that he's possessed by this evil spirit. And so, well, maybe that's true. Maybe it's not. We're shown an evil spirit, but we don't know if there really is one. Is it just like, he's got an extra personality, or it's the bad side of you as a human being, an excuse, for lack of a better term, right? So this gives us credence that it's probably a supernatural thing, which I don't necessarily mind. But yeah, where's good Cooper? We now know there's doppelgangers, the good and the bad, and I like that. It's an element that may be experimented with in season 3, which I'm not saying anything about at this point, because actually I've yet to really watch the entire thing. I think I watched the first episode or 2, and that's one of the reasons why I started the Xtreme Movie Show, so I could cover stuff like this, and thankfully we had an opportunity to cover it. But I wanted to point out one last little detail that I'm not sure if you caught right at the very end. We've talked about how the majority of the time with the opening credits, we get the same transition scenes, and there was one episode where the water turned black and we had ominous music. You caught that, right?
Yep.
At the very end of this episode, I think all episodes ended with the Laura's theme playing, and you had the picture of like Laura's yearbook photo just sitting there, and it was just a zoom in on it, right? That's how most of these episodes, I think, end, and I think almost all of them, right? But the way this one ends, it ends with Laura's theme playing, but it's actually a cup of coffee, and you see in the reflection on the cup of coffee, because the coffee shot from the top, at an angle, you see Laura looking happy and smiling in it like she's real. I just thought that was a nice little change too, I guess. I don't know. I don't think it means anything.
I know. I did notice that. I just didn't know what the hell it's supposed to mean.
And that's the beauty of Twin Peaks, is that there's a lot of crap put in there that's ambiguous, where you can, as a human, put your own spin on it. And that's what makes certain things talkable. And this is where I said, if it wasn't for a show like this, I don't know that you would have Lost, which would be several years later, a decade or so later. You wouldn't have The Sopranos. You wouldn't have what people consider to be the second golden age of television, with tight writing, less episodes in a season, but really thought out characters and a plot line that you don't know where the hell it's going, but you can sense that it's been fleshed out. And obviously the big fault with Twin Peaks was ABC screwing around with the time slots and saying, hey, you need to let everybody know who did kill Laura Palmer, when Lynch is like, no, you don't. That's the whole goose that laid the golden egg sort of thing. And if we do that, no one's going to give a shit anymore. And he was right. It was, you let that be the mystery, and you just explore all the characters in the town. And, now that we know what happens with it, where do you go? Well, he was hands off for the most part until season 3, and potentially a season 4, with Wisteria being a project he's filming for Netflix currently. So, yeah, I just wanted to say that overall, just talking about 1 and 2, is obviously I think season 1 is phenomenal. Some of the best TV I've ever seen. It's up there with The Prisoner and a couple other things. Obviously, season 2's took a dip in quality, but I still think there's enough memorable things in it that make it worthwhile to watch. I can't tell you for me how special it is to revisit it after 30 years, but also explore it with you, somebody that's never watched it all, didn't really know what the fuss was all about. And it's still hard for me to communicate, even today, to you how big this was back in the time for that year and a half that this was on TV. 1 episode a week, all this weird, strange crap going on. Oh my God, it was phenomenal. People loved it. It was an event like almost no other at the time. So, Game of Thrones, everyone thinks that was really tight writing. I would disagree. It's a little bit busy. It shoves a lot of stuff in there. It's got nothing on Twin Peaks when it comes to level of detail. And let me just say, even if you want to argue that it does, well, Twin Peaks kind of did it first. So it's one of the reasons why I wanted to come, because it is extreme, and that's what we cover here on the Xtreme Movie Show. Thoughts and feelings about season 1, 2, the whole experience. Where are you at with it now? Now that you've seen the final ending, all I'll say is the scene of Cooper bashing his head in the mirror and laughing because the bad guy got him. I always thought to myself, God, I hope Professor Pixel never, ever finds out what happens there until he watches it all the way through to the end. Thankfully, you didn't. So yeah. I feel incredible about that.
Yeah. I mean,
I got you.
I'm going to say this. I've been waiting for this to happen, because ever since we learned that Bob can go into other bodies, and out of all the people that he could overtake, Cooper's the main one too, and he doesn't have any kind of protection. And whenever the hands started shaking and he was the main one, he did it like twice. I was worried that by the end of that episode, Bob was going to take his next form, and I thought it was going to be Cooper. But I was wrong, and they saved that kind of move until the end. If I was watching this when it came out, however long that was, I don't know if I would have watched the movie next, because it doesn't sit perfectly well with me. I get what they're going for, and that kind of move is bold. But at the same time, the idea that Agent Cooper, the real reason to watch Twin Peaks, is taken over by the villain. What the hell happens now? And I wouldn't get an answer. Fire Walk with Me, I believe, doesn't have any kind of answer. It's mostly a prequel. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure what it would have been like back then. But I do know that after we finish Firewalk with Me next week, then we're going to dive right into season 3.
Yeah, and all I'll say about Firewalk with Me is that, Lynch did it all and had what he wanted in it, so it's a lot more like season 1 in terms of being true to what we think Twin Peaks is. Obviously, it got expanded in season 2, and there was some hit and miss in there, like there usually is. All I know is here at the end of season 2, I was hoping for a season 3, even though I knew there wasn't going to be one. And it was a controversial ending. A lot of people thought that Lynch took a dump on it, saying, like, screw you. And I can understand it if that were the case. I don't think that it was, but a part of me was like, you know what? It's going to be up to Garland Briggs to assemble some people to try to go after Cooper, if he needs to. But the fact that he's out now and he's doppelganger, I'm like, oh, this is going to be awesome. You take the most powerful person, you give him a weakness, and then you get all the B-level players to somehow work together in a way to do it. And when the groups were working together, like the ladies doing the detective work, even Tremaine and Dipshit Andy, working together for an episode or two was kind of funny. And the girls working together and the other stuff, it works. And, the chemistry of putting together different groups. Again, this really was not done a lot in terms of weekly television up to this point. And so now we think of it as standard practice when you have shows like The Walking Dead and everything else, whether you like the shows, think they suck, think they're trash, think they're woke, whatever your feeling is about whatever TV you like. The point is a template. This was cutting edge. And I think that with Firewalk with Me, a lot of people were kind of Twin Peaks out because of all the screwing around that was going on for it. And media was kind of changing at the time. Taste was changing, as well as movies and other things. But the people that really like Twin Peaks, I think, and are really hardcore fans like season 1, like myself, they really like Firewalk with Me. So it'll be interesting to see what you have to say about it. I have not seen it since it was out in theaters. So for me, it's a good 29 years, 30 years, whatever it's been. It'll be interesting to take a look at that and see it too. But unfortunately, with season 3, some people in the real world either were retired by this point, didn't want to do it, or passed away. So like the character of a Major Briggs, that particular actor who I knew would go on to do like that show with Richard Dean Anderson, Stargate, whichever spinoff that was from the movies, he would be a star in that too. He always caught my eye because he did such a good job in this, and so did a lot of side characters that would go on and do a lot of other things too. So look forward to talking about that next week. Any last thoughts that you want to get out there before we call it a night?
Not really. I'm just I want to know what's
your grade
next.
What's your grade?
What's my grade of this season or the show?
All Twin Peaks. The show.
All Twin Peaks. It's so really good.
Yeah.
It has some stuff that I've really disliked, even in the first season, and that's mostly because of Deputy Dumbass, I'll admit. But overall, this is really a good show, and I'm glad finally took a bite of that bullet and got into it.
Awesome. Yeah, there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Twin Peaks season finale of season 2. We'll look forward to doing Firewalk with Me here soon, and then after that, season 3 from Showtime in the year 2017. I believe 18 episodes, and we'll see by the time that's over with in about 4 to 6 months if the potential season 4 of Twin Peaks might be showing, or a spinoff series of it called Wisteria that Lynch is currently filming right now, I believe. On that note, I'll leave you guys with all the suggestions and comments that you've had before about things to contact me. Let me know what you guys want us to give us a cover. Had a few people reach out to me recently about a couple things. They said, oh, you got to check this out. You got to check this out. And a few people about Twin Peaks and a few about some other movies. So I like the fact that people are still interested in a show that's over 30 years old. It's extreme. It's awesome. All right, for Professor Pixel, again, I'm your host, Rob, here on the Xtreme Movie Show. I'd like to thank everybody for listening. Everybody have a good night. Stay extreme.